and welcome back to Tenant 10, episode 104. Tenant 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council of West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and local partner Sprocket Innovation in Paducah and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. If you do the math, episode 104 is wrapping up officially 2 years of episode. Next week, we will be starting our third year of Tenant 10. I want to wrap up our second year, if you will, looking at our calendar year ahead. One of the interesting things that I always see at the end of a year and the beginning of the next year is the predictions and the trends to watch for that upcoming year. And then at the end of the year, you get to go back and oh, I was so smart, I predicted everything, or you can see where you were wrong, which is what happens sometimes as well. But looking at different things, I came across um, one particular article that I thought was interesting and worth sharing because it was cybercrimes to watch for and to watch in 2023. But it wasn't all the typical things. We know that some of the cybercrimes are going to be big this year because they were big last year and they were big the year before. Some are going to continue, but there's also some new ones that are popping up in it, and that's really um, what drew my interest to this article. So I want to go over the 5 cyber crimes to watch in 2023. There's a couple of familiar things on here, things that we've talked about several times on Tenet 10 in the past, but there's also a couple of new things. And this one is a new thing. Scanning QR codes could compromise your personal data. So when QR codes have been around for a long time, but when COVID happened and restaurants were trying to come out of COVID, reopen, and create ways to have less less things touched. Some restaurants would create paper menus where you just throw them away. Some, like this picture on the screen shows, that you would um, they would have a QR code on the table, and you would scan the QR code on the table, and it would pop up the menu on your phone. Um, there's a lot of different ways that people have done that. Sometimes if you go to Starbucks, you can order online and then you pick it up with your QR code in the drive-through or something like that. At Walmart now, if you don't want to pay with cash or your credit card and you're doing one of the self-checkout um, lanes, you can actually pay with the Walmart app on your phone. And basically what happens is you'll scan that QR code that pops up on the screen. It'll automatically open that app and it'll go through that process for you. And you can pay with your phone. I've done that. I actually went in Walmart one day and forgot my wallet and in the car, and I didn't want to go back out, so I just paid with my phone. It's great. It's really convenient. But here's what's going to happen, like with everything, hackers are going to play on that convenience. You hear me say on 10 at 10, don't click the link. Don't click the link. Make sure that link is truly from a trustworthy source. What the whole thing about QR codes is that QR code is basically sending you a link. And you don't have to type in www dot whatever the link is. You can just scan the QR code and it's automatically going to take you to that web page. It's going to take you to that app, which is essentially going through a URL to get you to it. So the whole reason I don't want you to open links in email, we are doing with this. We are doing with QR codes. We are opening links and trusting QR codes to um, for convenience to allow us to do things. So just like everything that we get used to, somebody's going to have evil intentions, and I think that was their first prediction, and I think that's a good one. I think we are going to start seeing QR codes becoming more and more um, vulnerable to attacks, and URLs within QR codes directing us to a harmful website versus a helpful website. So that's something that you really got to be careful about. Ransomware threats expected to continue rising. We talked a couple weeks ago that the trends have shown a leveling off. Now, does that trend of leveling off continue in 2023 or does it rise? That's up for debate. But here's what I do know about ransomware for sure. Even if it's at a plateau, it is still the highest threat that we have right now by far. Um, if you'll remember, um, during COVID, at least in Kentucky, every afternoon the governor would have a address and talk about that we were, or the state health commissioner would get up there and talk about how we want to see a plateau of the numbers. Um, we wanted to see a plateau. Well, that plateau was still the peak. It just we were staying at the peak. It wasn't continuing to increase, but it was still bad. It wasn't, you know, replicating and growing at an alarming rate, but we were still at that alarming rate. Um, and so even if we plateau with ransomware, we're still at a rate that is higher than it's ever been. So I want you to keep that in mind. Is it going to continue to rise? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think there's some other avenues that hackers are going to use. I think they're going to have to modify the way they're doing ransomware for it to continue to be successful. There's some federal laws and state laws that are coming along that will make it more difficult for them. But I do think that's a threat that we got to look at. But what I also know for sure, or what I don't know this for sure. Let me rephrase that. But what also is stated in this article is that the total losses are expected to be over 7 trillion globally in 2023, and some sources say more than double that number is expected to be lost in 2023. So we're talking about trillions of dollars that we're going to lose due to cybersecurity across the globe. So whether that ransomware threat is the threat or something else, this is a really big problem that we have right now. Um, we've talked about over the past year supply chain issues. Our supply chain is very vulnerable, and it's vulnerable for a couple of reasons. You can't see these graphics very well on the screen, but the first one talks about the Chinese have back doors in some of the telecom products that they produce. I don't know that. I haven't looked at the back door, but there are reports by Homeland Security and federal agencies that talk about how some products are have back doors in it so that the Chinese government can look at it. Maybe it doesn't. What I also know is that we have seen supply chain attacks like solar winds. So when you're buying hardware, when you're buying software, you're trusting the people that manufactured it, that trusting the people that built it. That's a challenge. That's a security risk that makes us vulnerable. And then in some cases, we can't even get stuff. Um, so you may identify a flaw or a vulnerable component of your network, and it may take you 6 months to purchase the equipment to close that gap, to address that issue. So that's a challenge. That's going to continue to be a challenge, and that's going to be an area that there's a lot of investment in 2023, at least. Both this article alludes to that, and I actually firmly believe that because that's a very weak point for many organizations. And then last, um, cyber criminals will increase attacks on electric vehicles. One of the things that was this um, uh, popular thought for years and years in IT is that if you had a Mac, then you weren't susceptible to viruses like you were on Windows. And that was true, but it wasn't true because Mac was so much more secure. It was true because attackers are going to go where they can make the most money. And if 95% of the people that could be attacked are using Windows computers, then you're going to write and modify your virus to work on where the majority of people are, not where only 5% are. Now that's changed because there's more people using Apple devices than there's ever been because of iPhones and iPads. Um, so that's not true anymore. Well, that was true with electric vehicles as well. They're not. Why would I attack an electric vehicle if, or an attacker target an electric vehicle if it was such a small number? As that number grows, then those attacks are going to grow as well. As the interest in electric vehicles grow, then that's going to grow as well. But what also happens is electric vehicle has to have power to charge. So a cyber attack on the electric grid is also a cyber attack on electric vehicles. So there's a lot of components in this that make electric vehicles a target of potential cyber terrorism, and I think that trend's going to continue as well. Well, there's a lot of things that we could look at, and a lot of trends that we could follow. This was just one article of the top 5 cyber crimes to watch out for in 2023, and there's others that may or may not come true. But all of these issues that we're talking about in this article was from Fox, that are being talked about are things that we should be aware of and that we should protect ourselves from. Went a little long today, but I thought these were interesting and things that I wanted to share. I hope you find them interesting. As we are gearing up to starting our third year of 10 at 10, let me know what topics, what questions you have, what things that you would like to see discussed on here. We will revisit some things that we've talked about the last few years, but I want to make sure I address anything new that you might be interested in as well. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'll see you back here next week on 10 at 10. Thank you. Bye.